We are back for track number 2 of the fall cohort 2023 because we're just keeping track of all our tracks for ReFre5hed. We have with us, so not only is it myself and Kevin this time, but we have, there you go, drum roll. We have Kristine, Wynne with us. We are in Connecticut High School. And I'm just going to toss it to Kristine to introduce herself and her role and what her day-to-day looks like.
Okay, so I'm Kristine. I know Victoria very well. We started together pretty much, right, in 16 is when I started. I think you came right after that. So my role here is I'm an E&L teacher. I teach grades 9 through 11 pretty much. I don't have any seniors this year, but I co-teach 3 periods of history and 2 periods I have on my own.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So now your population of kids, so it's you and Mark in the department, correct, for the high school.
Yes.
I remember when coming into Connecticut, so as a BOCES employee, and that was 2015, and then hired soon after that, that the E&L department has just grown so much.
So drastically.
Over all of that time.
Yes.
And I always reflect back to when I was a student myself, going back in time just a little bit, and then I'll have teachers come and be like, you're not old yet. That's what's going to happen on our discussion board. But I remember there was a lot of, what are we calling E&L? Like, E&L wasn't E&L when we were in school. I'm sure you
No.
Yeah.
Not that I can do.
I remember it being ESL, and there was probably 3 kids in the whole school, or 4 kids in the entire school that had that service, and I, quite frankly, as a student, did not even know what it was. They just left the classroom and came back.
Yeah. That was the same when I was in school, too, and we're the same age, pretty much. So, so in 2015, there was a big shift, okay, because the state was realizing, wow, these kids are completely underserviced. And it would just be that. There'd be a kid that doesn't speak English in the district, and they would get pulled out. So almost like a resource room, maybe once a day. There was no concept of co-teaching for E&L. There was no mandates at all, actually. And then into 2015, and this is why there's been such a boom as far as the department, the mandates were put in place. So now those children that were classified as E&L, or, as we refer to them, ESL, but they say E&L now because it might not be their second language, it could be their 3rd, 4th, whatever. But it's now English as a new language. So those kids that were classified based on 1 out of 5 levels get a certain number of minutes per week as far as services. So obviously, if they're entering emerging, which are the first 2 levels, they're going to get more minutes per week than my expanding or commanding kids. So that also required a lot more staff, because now you have all these kids identified that weren't.
Sure.
And that's really why that happened, and that's why the department grew so much. And that's where we're at. So yeah, when I started, I want to say there was maybe 6 or 7 E&L teachers in the whole district. It could be lower. Maybe it was 5, and now I think we're up to 13 or 14. Yeah, so that's more than double. Yeah.
And it's almost in.
And we're gonna get another one this year, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I can almost guarantee.
That's what I hear. It's just
constantly growing. They're constantly, moving in from other districts, other countries. It is a very transient population, so they'll come in, they'll go out, but they're always coming.
What are the countries that you see that they're
coming from most? So at the high school level,
because you're technically getting it from the entire community, whereas if I was focusing in on, say, Sycamore, they're just in that area. So
exactly. So at Duffield, just to piggyback off that, I think, or is it Cherokee, one of them, their largest population is actually Bengali. I want to say that's correct, or I don't know if it's not, but I'm pretty sure it's Bangladesh. Ours is definitely Spanish, is the language spoken. As far as what country they're from most, I have a lot of Colombians.
Okay.
I would probably say that's the most. Next would maybe be Honduras. It would be like Honduras, El Salvador tied, and then just random other Latin American countries. We have a girl from Turkey this year. We've had Jordanian. We've had French. We've had everywhere. Chinese. I mean Pakistan. Like so many.
And
over the years. Yeah.
I think one of the, I'm going to call it a misconception
Mm-hmm.
of this population, or I should say of the teachers
Mm-hmm.
teaching it, is how are you reaching these students when you don't know their language? So they're coming in, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're coming from Latin America, they're coming from China, they're coming from all these different countries, right?
Yeah.
And you are the E&L teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Right,
so and I don't speak another language.
And she only speaks English,
I
guys.
don't speak Spanish. Right? That's always my first question.
Right.
When
so
I tell them my job.
What are some strategies that you use? And we're gonna get to the technology piece in just a minute, but non-technology related.
Yes.
What are some strategies that you use with these students in order to communicate effectively, know that what they need on a daily basis,
Absolutely.
and basically survive? Because if they're entering,
Mm-hmm.
that's what we're trying to get them to do.
100%. So. Yes, again, taking out the technology piece, because we will talk about that as far as Google Translate and all the things that offers. But it's really, you have to almost look at it like you're teaching a child or a baby how to speak English. Well, how do you do that? You do it, you start very, very basic, okay? You're using basic, like almost one word, you're piecemealing one word things together. And then you're doing it through body language. It's a lot of body language. Expressions, pictures. That's just the easiest way I can say how I teach them English without Google Translate or anything like that. It's visuals. It's expressions. It's how you would teach a 2-year-old and 3-year-old.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I always revert back. So I have an almost 3-year-old at home.
Yeah.
And he's at that gap now. Kevin has met him a couple times. You've actually also met him a couple times.
Mm-hmm.
And he's at that gap where now he's putting like 3 to 5 words together at a time.
Yeah.
And there was that gap of time where it's like he knew one word and you would say something to him. And he's just looking at you like, huh? What?
And that's,
you know,
it's
and
what
that's
it
the reality
is.
of it. And
it is the reality.
And if we think about visiting a different country,
exactly.
You
Always
know?
put yourself in their shoes.
Right, and I think that's what we have to do. Like I remember for my honeymoon, we went to France. We went to Paris mostly, and then kind of visited outside areas too. And we were prepping to just say simple phrases. I could not absorb it because I had Spanish mixed in my head because that's what I learned in school and all that stuff. But I got, bonjour and all these things across. But I remember getting there and being afraid of 100%. Not being able to communicate. And what if I wanted to buy something that I needed? Like, what am I doing now at that point, right?
Yes.
And I think that's where technology now brings it into a much better role and piece, and it's making things, although not perfect, it's making it easier for us.
Yes.
So now I want to kind of pick your brain about that. Like, how does that help you on the day-to-day of communication with your students?
Sure. So, yeah, I just think back to how these kids, like, if you were an immigrant to this country and this was pre the phone and pre the internet, I mean, obviously it's doable. They were just forced to learn the language without any use of technology. But I can't imagine how incredibly challenging that was. And I think the beauty of technology is now we have both. So you could be forced sometimes, like sometimes I don't allow translation using Google Translate, but I'm going to say a majority of the time based on their level, especially if they're lower level, I'm going to let you translate the directions. I'm going to let you see things in your home language and then side by side with English. I don't see anything wrong with that. I think it's just a beautiful tool, and why would we not embrace that? So as far as Google, we have Google Translate, so that's pretty much used for my kids on a daily basis.
And I will point out, Kevin, he's our Google admin, so he's turning on all those toggles on and off in this console.
Oh my
this
god.
behind the scenes, so everything
See,
that's
I didn't even know
where
that.
Kevin comes into
Okay.
play. All of the tools that we have available, he makes the
Ah.
magic happen.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kevin.
I don't know what we would do without you.
No.
I couldn't do my job.
And that's
Yeah.
the beauty of bringing us two together
Yeah, that's
into
awesome.
this sort of space is to
Right.
realize like everything that we're doing in the classrooms
Mhm.
and all of this technology that we have, it wouldn't be working unless it was for our IT staff
Yeah.
because they have
I didn't even know that.
right.
Right.
You wouldn't think
I
that. You
wouldn't
just
think
come
that.
into work and
I click
you
what I
turn
need to
things
click.
on, you get an email.
It's just there and it works.
It works.
Yeah.
And then if it doesn't work, you're like,
I call
why
you.
isn't this fixed? You know, right? But they're managing
That's-
everything. So
Wow.
that's one of the pieces that Kevin brings to the table.
That's awesome.
One of the many pieces.
Yeah. Yeah, so, to go with that, we do, so just simply, you could do it on an app. Now, actually, the app itself, the kids, which they feel most comfortable with doing, is they'll take the phone, they'll scan a document, highlight the words that they need, and it translates it right to the
Right on the screen.
on
right?
the screen, right?
And that's within Google Translate.
Correct.
Right?
Yes. So
It's pretty cool.
it's really cool, and they really, like we said, it's almost like survival at this point if they have absolutely no English when they come here.
Right.
So they're constantly using that. As far as tests, assignments, if you do anything in Google Docs, you can go to Tools, Translate, and you translate it over to whatever language they need.
And are they saying, so like there was a debate, I want to say a
I-
couple of years ago,
Uh-huh.
that, listen, it's not correct, right?
Yes. It's not perfect.
I think it's not perfect.
It's not
and I don't
perfect.
think it's ever going to be
I-
because of the
no.
different dialects, right?
Correct. And language teachers might very well disagree with me. Like, even certain friends, it's a debate that's still ongoing because it is incorrect. Like, it not fully, but it's not perfect, is what we're saying. It doesn't perfectly translate. So there's a lot of a school of thought that says, well, then we shouldn't be using it. That it's not effective. I feel the opposite.
I do
Yeah, I think when you get to a certain level, as far as the ENL levels, if you're more advanced, no, you shouldn't be using it. Now we really have to focus in on just simply reading and writing more. And if it's a content specific word, okay, then use it for that word. But don't just translate over your whole entire test or whatever. But for the beginning levels, yeah, why wouldn't? Why would you not allow them to have a tool that's only going to benefit them?
Right.
It's not cheating. It's
Right.
not anything. It's giving them more of an opportunity to actually be successful
And
in the content and in the language itself.
right. And I always look at it as more of a gradual release with them.
That's
Right.
That's the perfect phrase to use. That's
So,
exactly
right.
how I
I
would
think
say
of it like when I was introduced to ENL and
Yeah.
everything that you do, I
Yeah.
saw this triangle and it
Yeah.
had all the tiers.
Yes.
And as you get to the top, you're trying to give them, they should be learning the language at that point and
Yep.
all that. So I think technology has come a long way between Google Translate
Yeah.
and all of it's not just, hey, I'm going to speak and let it translate. They have these tools
Yeah, no.
inside that now
Exactly.
that's going to, hey, we have a piece of paper here and the student doesn't know what it says.
Mhm.
Instead of them sitting there and doing nothing, let them use their resources and the technology that we have available.
And now they
to
can
help
do
them.
it too, like all the other kids in the classroom,
Right.
which is also another component. Like when I talk about equity and making sure things are fair, and yeah, because the kid and the success and like the joy you see on their face when they're like, oh, I can do it too. Like now I actually know what that means. I'm able to complete a task.
Right.
It's sometimes they can't, like you said, they'll just stare at it and they check out and they lose faith in themselves, and so it's multi-leveled as to why I think it's so important to use.
I want to bring up a project that we did really briefly as I'm looking at the time, and she has to go. It goes by quickly.
It's wow.
I'm like, oh, we'll have enough time. Now I'm looking at the time.
Okay.
We did a project together.
Yes,
in a social studies class. We had a couple of projects that we did together, but it was in a social studies class, and it was Socratic seminar style. Now, when I was first given the idea, and Elise Pulliam was the person that kind of like led this idea, and I'm like, the E&L kids though, the E&L kids, like, I worry, you worry, and I'm sure that's in the back of your, it's in the front of your mind every single day. Like, we're talking about Socratic seminar. How are we going to get these students to feel and be successful? And I think one of the things that we did was have that back channel chat with Padlet at the time. I believe it was through Padlet.
That's right.
And they were able, if they could not speak efficiently enough to in that discussion part of the middle circle, they were able to be on their devices and chime in on that back channel chat.
Yes, that's exactly what they did. So just that offering of the Padlet, that's what we used, that allowed them to still participate in the discussion by use of writing it, instead of feeling like
they're on the spot and they needed to participate in that very moment.
And then the other beauty we did, and I don't know if you remember this, we allowed them to go in their home language. And then some of them debated that way too. That's not using technology, but it's all the things to allow them to feel successful, be successful in high school and life. And so it's giving them choice, it's giving them options. And that Padlet, that was amazing. I actually forgot about that piece that
I told her I was bringing up
another
thing, and I was like, no, we're going to talk
Wait, I was like, I thought we were talking about our menu.
Well, that was the other project. I don't know if we could squeeze that in. But we did a digital learning menu where they had the choice of what assignments they were going to accomplish. And we had learning paths for them as well. So they were able to choose, hey, I feel more comfortable doing these assignments rather than writing the paper. They could do a podcast was one of the options. They could define vocabulary words to improve and to, give them.
Satisfy both the language and the task of the assignment.
Right. Last piece. We are doing fall fitness with ReFre5hed.
I love it.
So we're not muscle building.
No, we're
that
not.
would not go
Clearly
over
not.
well with me. Maybe with Kevin, not with me. Last week, we did a beach theme where the challenge, if they wanted to, was to take a walk by water. So we chose the beach because that was easier for us. And it just impacts our, mental health. We're trying to promote what makes us feel good. It doesn't have to be push-ups or sit-ups or anything like that, but it's like what makes us feel good. I think oftentimes when I hear the word fitness, I think of I have to run. And that's not the purpose of this. So, is there anything that you like to do, whether it's just you, and the bell has rung, but we're going to continue with it, we're going to run with it. Is there anything you like to do, either yourself or with your students, that you would like everyone to have the opportunity in participating in?
So I do something, and I've done it with my students, but I personally do it all the time. It's called the 5-7-8 breathing method. So if I'm feeling stressed or if I'm feeling anxious, I'll breathe in for 5 seconds, hold it for 7, breathe out for 8. And if you do that a few times, you will completely calm down your nervous system and your heart rate to a rate where you're not wanting to jump out the window.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I think we could use that.
Yeah. Definitely gonna.
We like 5-7-8. 5-7-8 all around.
5-7-8. Yeah. All right. Yeah. So hopefully you guys will participate in the 5-7-8. You'll see the link on where to put those pictures, videos, anything you want to share about that in our discussion board. I want to thank you so much for
having me
being here.
Thank you.
I think it was a ton of knowledge for the both of us coming from the technical end and the instructional perspective of technology.
It was amazing.
And I think we're just going to keep continuing the conversation with you at some other point.
I love it.